But I think the key to long-term success with it is to allow yourself the time and invest actually. To begin with, we were so focused on sales. We were like, do we keep investing in the operational side, or do we hire more salespeople? Do we constantly focus on this kind of new revenue generation piece? And actually stepping back and going, no, actually we're building something here that needs to stand the test of time. We need to invest in that. I think that goes a long way as well. So really just investing and being willing to hire the right people that can help stabilize the ship as it's sailing forward.
Before we start the show, I have a quick question for you. Is your resume stuck in the rejection pile? At Resume Assassin, I create powerful resumes that showcase your skills, experience, and achievements, getting you noticed by recruiters. I'll also optimize your LinkedIn profile, transforming it into a magnet for opportunity. Visit resumeassassin.com today and take charge of your job search. Visit resumeassassin.com. So in this episode, I'm sitting down with an entrepreneur who's mastered the art of scaling, exiting, and investing, Luke Tobin. From launching a digital marketing agency in his spare bedroom to selling it in an 8-figure deal, Luke has built and exited multiple businesses, transforming his expertise into a proven framework for success. Now, as the CEO of Coban Capital, he's helping ambitious entrepreneurs grow and exit their businesses without burning out. So we'll unpack the real, unfiltered truths about entrepreneurship, building a sellable business, what it takes to create lasting wealth, and just so much more, you guys. So before we get into the topic today, Luke, I want to ask you a question that I ask all of my guests. In 10 words or less, what's the best piece of advice that someone has ever given you?
Great question. Probably it would have to be find people better than yourself to do the roles in the business that you don't want to do. I don't know if that was quite 10 words, but I hope close enough. Yeah, probably close.
Yep, and that's, myself being in business, that's a hard lesson that I've learned over the last 10 years. So that is gold right there. Write that one down, everybody. So Luke, from freelancing in a spare bedroom to an 8-figure exit, what was the defining moment that really changed everything for you?
I think probably the kind of approach that I took from freelancing. So I would try to embed myself really deeply into a client's business. So from the very beginning, I would go and spend 2-3 days on site with the clients to understand their kind of short, mid, long-term goals, really unpack that kind of relationship piece that you get when you go into a company as an employee, but actually often as a freelancer, it's very hands-off and you only get to see elements of that. So I would try to go in and really, establish myself, integrated part of their team. And that made a huge difference. So that kind of mentality meant the clients stuck, they stayed. And by staying, in the end, I was like, okay, this is too much work just for me. So then I need more people. And that's really where the scale came. And in the first probably 2-3 years, we only lost one client. So we were bringing in 3-4 new clients, sometimes a month, and just scaling up. So yeah, it was that kind of, if we look at the marketing industry in general, having an agency is nothing unique. Selling services, it's very commoditized now. Social media, PPC, whatever it is. The thing that sets you apart is how you manage those relationships. And I think that's the thing that really kind of nailed for us.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing that sets you apart is how you manage those relationships. I think that that's such an important statement. And I also love that you said that the very first thing that you did was spend time with your clients. You would spend 2 to 3 days deeply embedding yourself into their business. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? How did you do that? And what are some things that you uncovered with your clients? How were you able to help them better in doing that?
Definitely. It was slightly easier, I think, pre-COVID, because I would physically go in the office and I'd be there, do lunches, dinners, whatever. A lot of clients I found over the last few years have kind of pushed back a little bit on some of that kind of workshopy type sessions, because it's quite a lot for them as well. 2-3 days, sometimes we could even spend a week in a larger client. So we tended to break that up into different sessions. Sometimes it would be like 2-3 hours in the end. But to start with, it was very much me on site, sat there. I said, look, if you don't have the time for me, don't worry. I'm going to sit with the team members, understand who to go to for XYZ, go for lunch with the team, embed myself, become a core function of the business. Although I might be sat in a different room or a different office, I'm still, somebody that they can rely on and they can come to. So that was the methodology, and it worked better than I could have imagined, to be honest. So it was great. And a lot of agencies talk about this kind of integrated marketing, but not very many of them spend more than a few hours in a workshop or a meeting with their clients. So it really kind of took that, and I looked at the model and I thought, well, what's kind of missing? Why does there tend to be a bit of a no man's land that sits between the client and the agency, and how do we build a bridge across that? And I really thought that time and relationship building was the key.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that's lacking in today's market. I mean, you mentioned you were able to do that pre-COVID, and obviously COVID shifted a lot of things in our economy, especially when it comes to business and being able to work face to face with people. But even after that COVID era, it was like people kind of stayed remote. And so they don't get that personal touch. They don't get somebody actually physically going into their office and becoming a core function of their business. It just doesn't really happen today.
No, it doesn't. And the way that we challenge that back with the clients is we'd break it up. So even if it was 4 half days or 6 half days or whatever, over the course of the first month, that was how we approached it. And you can do some of that virtually, but it is a lot harder, obviously, to establish those connections properly.
So scaling fast is one thing, but building a business that actually lasts is another. So what would you say is the key to sustainable high growth success?
Yeah, it's not for the faint-hearted, actually. It's hard. You have this kind of seesaw effect. So, you bring in more sales, then your operations aren't in a place to deal with the new sales, and you kind of constantly... Fast growth is a challenge, but, it's an exciting place to be. I think it's probably hard on the employees until you get those processes figured out. But I think the key to long-term success with it is to allow yourself the time and invest, actually. To begin with, we were so focused on sales. We were like, do we keep investing in the operational side, or do we hire more salespeople? Do we constantly focus on this kind of new revenue generation piece? And actually stepping back and go, no, actually, we're building something here that needs to stand the test of time. We need to invest in that. I think that goes a long way as well. So really just investing and being willing to hire the right people that can help stabilize the ship as it's sailing forward.
Yeah, I think that especially for, people that are scaling so quickly, you're absolutely right. It's like, okay, do I invest in operations to really get those systems put into place? I mean, but before I need that, I need the marketing piece, right? I actually need the lead generation and the people coming in that want my products or the services that I'm selling. And then you need the sales processes put into place. So what it learned comes first. What do you invest in? Somebody that has a small business and they're trying to scale it, do they invest in marketing? Do they start by investing in sales, operations? What's the order of operation?
I think everything starts with new revenue, right? New revenue fixes all problems. If you've got the revenue, you can do the ops stuff, you can do all the other sexy stuff around it. So I would focus very heavily on revenue generation to begin with, and that can be a mix of organic stuff that doesn't cost you too much money, but the more you invest in that revenue generation machine, the stronger it will be. Yeah.
So how do you actually build a revenue generation machine, whether it's paid or organic?
I think, these days it's actually probably easier than ever, although quite noisy. So if you think about personal brand and you think about, using social media platforms for automation and outreach, all of that's great. And if you can establish yourself as an authority, that really helps. But there is obviously some fairly low entry social media ads, that you can do depending on your products or services. Yeah. And then a lot of people ignore existing networks as well, right? So actually just going out and asking people for referrals, asking for support, those first few clients that you get, ask them for a referral, ask them if they can name 5 people similar to them, and you'll often get at least a couple of referrals back that way. And I think people ignore that all too often. They're too focused on new sales that are outside of that immediate circle, but actually there's a lot more you could probably farm looking closer to home as well.
Yeah, I would say in my own business, so I write resumes and I optimize LinkedIn profiles with my company Resume Assassin, and that is something that, if I were to rewind 10 years ago, I would be just absolutely thanking myself, because that's the very first thing that I did with my first client, was ask for number one, reviews, and number two, referrals. And that's the best way. Like you said, Luke, it's like they probably know 5 other people that need to update their resume. And they did, and that's kind of how we were kind of chatting before we pressed record today. That's how my business has grown. It's been almost 100% organic, just simply by asking people for referrals. So that's so important.
I find people actually want to help other people, right? And if you ask for help, generally you'll find it.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely agree. So you also mentioned kind of the low-hanging fruit with advertising, and that's, in my own business, I'm thinking about, I don't run ads right now. And I've heard, I listen to a lot of podcasts, a lot of business marketing related podcasts, and I've just heard some horror stories with advertising and how it just right now, advertising on Facebook or Instagram or whatever it is, it's awful because it's so darn expensive. So could you tell us a little bit more about those low-hanging fruit? Like, for somebody that's just kind of getting into advertising, what would be the best way to get in and start with a small marketing budget and actually perhaps start to have success?
Yeah, I mean, look, it is tricky, and it is becoming more and more saturated, which pushes prices up in the auctions on these platforms. So I think Meta is still relatively cheap compared to other platforms. So, you can do fairly well, but there's a mix of quality issues sometimes in the campaigns on there. You've got to get it right. But also maybe, thinking outside the box a bit when it comes to like ambassadors or influencers, or doing some sort of affiliate, kickback for people that refer you. You can create mini sales agents, across your network just by giving them 15, 20%, whatever you're comfortable with giving them if you work it out. And encourage people to go out there and find you those referrals. So that might even be a stronger way of putting that money initially to work. Find an ambassador that's in a similar space, or that is a good profile for you. Ask them to do some content. There's all sorts of ways to approach it. There's probably may even be stronger than paid ads.
Yeah, totally agree. It's like there's this huge, what I've heard it called is like micro influencers, right? Mm-hmm. So people that have anywhere between 2,000 and 20K followers. But those followers are just so committed and dedicated to that person that they're following that sometimes they're going to provide more customers and business your way than maybe somebody that has 400,000 followers.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, it can. So again, you're not going to have to pay those guys the 20,000 too much. Some of them might even do it for free if you do them something in return. That your service or your product might be something they're interested in. That's probably lower cost for you maybe to offer them. So just do some value exchange, and that kind of thing works as well. And that really is currency, isn't it?
Absolutely. So not all businesses are sellable. So what separates a company that attracts buyers from one that struggles to exit?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's I think the ones that are most successful think about exit from the very beginning, actually, and they start to build foundational things in place from the very get-go. So like, what is one question I always start with when I talk to businesses that are looking to exit is, have you thought about or put yourself in your potential buyer's shoes? So actually try and sit down and think about, what would I want to look for if I was trying to buy my own business or a similar business to mine? And I guarantee you'll come up with things like, maybe a good manager or someone as a succession plan in place. You'll want all the information documented in a way that makes sense. You'll want kind of various bits of structure, maybe a solid sales strategy. Like, all of those things just give you some foundational bits then to start thinking about in your own business from an early beginning. From my perspective, my first 2 businesses that I sold, I've sold 4 now. My first 2, I really was fairly naive and wet behind the ears and didn't really know that I wanted to sell, so I kind of often didn't have those things in place, and I think that's really normal as well. But now, being a bit more seasoned at it, every business I start with a data room. I store information in a way that I know buyers will want to access, and I always, even when I'm evaluating that kind of product market fit, and do I go to the market with a business, before I do that I go, is this something that someone else, if I get it to where I think I can get it to, is this something someone else will want to buy? And if it's no, then you're basically buying a job forever, which is okay for some people, and maybe that's what they want. But if it is your plan to eventually exit, I would argue you need to strategize that very early.
Yeah. Could you talk to us more about that idea of a data room? That sounds so cool.
Yeah, so data room is it's just, I mean, it's you can Google this or
Yeah.
Chat GPT. It will give you a whole list of stuff, but it's basically like just a room, Google Drive or whatever, where
Yeah.
you store your information in a certain way. So you've got your accounts, you've got your sales ledgers, you've got your contracts, you've got all of your stuff just itemized into a really easy to use data. They call it a data room, just data dump, data
Yeah.
file storage, where when you've got a potential buyer or an investor, they can go in and they can access that information in a way that is recognizable to them. So it's not just all a bundle of here's 5 years worth of stuff. It's just from the very beginning thinking about structuring things in a way that will be attractive to somebody later. So if you get a potential buyer, so my last two businesses, two agencies that I sold, I never went to market to try and exit. So I had people approach me and they said, look, we're really interested in looking at your numbers. We might be interested in buying. It's like, cool, yeah, here's an NDA. Here's the data room. And straight away they were like, oh wow, okay, this is organized. This is the type of person we want to buy, type of business we want to buy.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I bet a lot of our listeners are sitting there like, well, yeah, I want a $1 billion exit or a multi-million-dollar exit or whatever it is. And you said, Luke, one of the first things to ask yourself is this something that someone else would actually want to buy? But I mean, I feel like that's a tough question to ask ourselves. Is there, how would we go about answering that? Because, I feel like I would be like, yeah, I think somebody would want to buy this. Why wouldn't they? Yeah. So, how can you break that down for us just a little bit more?
Yeah, of course. So the statistics are actually against people selling, right? It's 95% of businesses never sell. So only 5% actually sell. The scary thing with that, I think, is a lot of those businesses then end up fizzling out, or we're seeing a big changeover with baby boomers now. There's $10 trillion worth of businesses with no home to go to. The children that they've had growing up don't want to take over those businesses. There isn't enough people in the market to buy them. So a lot of those businesses will either be chomped up by competitors or will just dwindle out. So for me, I think it's about, to try and establish, like, is this something that's saleable? You could just go on things like Crunchbase. You could have a look online and look at like recent MMA statistics. You could look at whether your industry is growing year over year and whether it's forecast to grow. If it is, they're all really positive signs that actually people are going to be interested in it. So if things are on the up generally for an industry, that's a really good time to sell. If they're on the down, it's probably good to look at like a 5-year horizon and think about, will things stabilize? Marketing's a great example of that at the moment, right? With AI, everything's a bit up in the air, and valuations we've gone through the floor. And for marketing agencies, I think it will stabilize. I think there'll be a very different world of agencies as we go forward, but it will stabilize. So do your research, basically. Have a look at like, is your industry trending? What recent activity is there in mergers and acquisitions? If it's looking positive, that could be a good time to do it. Yeah,
love it. So growing without burning out sounds easier said than done, maybe. So what's your strategy for scaling while keeping your sanity?
Yeah. I mean, I've had burnout 2 or 3 times in my career, and it is no joke. It is a horrible experience. And I think when I look back at those times, I was just trying to do way too much and was taking on that first bit we spoke about, that 10 words or less question at the start. I was trying to take on too many roles of things I didn't enjoy. And in the end, I probably wasn't very good at. And actually that just affected everyone else around me. But more importantly, it affected me and my ability to be a good leader or inspire people. So one of the things that I coach and that I train people to do is build this kind of structural team and look at the bits that they're strongest at and look at where other people can fill in the gaps. And that really is a big focus. And it's hard to start with, right? Because every entrepreneur to begin with has to wear multiple hats. And we get that. We're not, there's no kind of shortcut of kind of going through that pain, unfortunately. But as soon as we possibly can, and when we've started hiring people and we've got some structure around us, we delegate to elevate. And that's the real key. You must delegate in order to elevate. Otherwise you'll hit glass ceilings all the time and you will burn out.
Yeah. I read this book. It was at the end of last year, but it was called Buy Back Your Time. And it was all about delegation. And it was just like life-changing for me as a solopreneur, and actually forced me to take that first step in reevaluating, okay, yes, I need help, because I had also personally faced burnout last summer, and it's no fun. Like you said, Luke, it's not pretty. And as an entrepreneur, you need to know when to ask for help. That's absolutely true.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, there's no shame in it. I think the beauty of our culture these days and society in general, like everyone can talk about it. There is help out there, and we said it earlier, but if you need help and you ask for help, I tend to find people will give it. And there's a lot of people that have been through and experienced burnout. So definitely seek help if you're having it, but try and delegate and try and get help. And also there's an element, I think, when you're running a business, you kind of forget that actually, if you did just shut the laptop for a few hours early, a couple of times in the week, probably nothing bad's going to happen, right? You're not doing rocket science or brain surgery or anything like that. Like, clients can wait an extra few hours. And I think one thing I tried for a while, which is a really small little hack, is just putting on my email an autoresponder, just saying, thanks, I've received your email. My typical response time's 24 hours or something like that. And that would just be enough to give me a layover to the next day, to not have to feel like I had to get an inbox zero or had to rush back to a client response or whatever. And as part of my onboarding with clients, I would always tell them, well, look, I'll endeavor to get back to you within 2 or 3 days maximum. If something's really, really urgent, obviously I'll come back to you same day. But if it's not, please give me a few days, and just set that expectation really early.
Yeah. I think that that's such a healthy way to approach responding to emails, because I fall into that trap, and I'm sure many other people that are listening to this do as well, is, if a client emails, I feel like I need to email them back almost immediately, when in reality, it's nothing that couldn't wait an extra day or possibly even 2 days. And that can most certainly help you with your mental sanity when it comes to keeping up with everything that goes with running a business, building a business, and doing it well.
Exactly. And also, from a client's perspective, they're going to get the better version of you delivering the work by not having you burnt out and stressed and trying to juggle too many things. So actually just giving yourself that breathing space, that freedom, means that the client will end up inevitably getting a better service. So it's a win-win actually all around, which is why just having those boundaries is critical.
Yeah, totally. Boundaries, the key word right there. I love it. So Luke, you've built teams across 8 countries. What's your blueprint for hiring, leading, and really keeping top talent engaged?
I think it always comes down to purpose, right? People want to feel valued. If people feel valued, they'll do a good job, and it's as simple as that. And I'm a big believer that you should hire people for the right attitude, train them for skill. I don't always go based on the best resume. It has to be character driven. If someone's self-motivated, and especially in this kind of remote world that we live in now, virtual world, and in many parts, it's important that people can be self-driven and motivated. And if you find those people and you give them purpose and you give them opportunity, I find that people tend to thrive. You get the odd outlier that lets you down, but most of the time it's going to work out for everybody. So that's the way that I try to approach it. So I very much my leadership style is very much kind of to give people freedom and a chance to kind of grow. I spend a lot of time early on understanding their own drivers and their values and really what is important to them. And I think if you then understand that and you build the framework for what work looks like for them Monday to Friday or whatever days it is that fits that lifestyle, everyone should be happy and it should work.
Yeah. So it sounds like you've hired mostly, amazing people. You said that there have been a few people that disappointed. Is there a way to kind of spot, okay, this person's gonna be awesome, or maybe during an interview this person will be great, or this person, well, maybe they won't work out? Are there any characteristics that we should be looking for?
I think it's hard. Interview processes, I think in general, are a bit broken in many ways, because everyone puts on their best. It's like going on your first date, totally. Right? Everyone's on best behavior, so it's really hard to kind of figure out what's what. There are some good techniques you can do. One thing that I brought in the last business at the agency, which worked really well, was a 2-day paid, almost again going back on my original thought process with clients, where we went and sat in those businesses. We invited candidates to come and sit in the business as well, or to work with us for a couple of days. It was a paid for experience. We'd do an initial phone or telephone interview, face to face, whatever it needed to be. Then we would get them to physically do 2 days work, have time spent with their team they would be working with, individuals, team leaders, managers, whatever, and we get them to do some work. And at the end of that, they've had lunch or they've had some conversations with some colleagues, they've got a feel for the culture, you've got a feel for how they're going to fit that culture. I would say probably 1 in 5 of those people we would actually keep on and employ. The other 4, it just wasn't a cultural fit. But if we hadn't done that, the kind of staged approach, we would never have known, and we probably would have hired them and then had a mistake. So I think don't be afraid to do those kind of full day working interview type sessions. I think they're fantastic and it can help you certainly avoid a few mistakes.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that. As an investor and acquirer, it seems like you spot winners early. So what signals kind of tell you a company is built for big success?
A lot of it's people. Again, it's about being able to see the good in people. So, if the founder has the right values, is strong, is malleable and open to feedback. I always find that a really important trait in a successful entrepreneur. They often are bloody minded and they know what they want, but they are open to feedback. And I think that's important. Being able to spot winners when it comes to investment in the kind of general times that we're in now, it needs to have an element of moat or defensibility. I think it's really important. There are some outliers. So obviously the marketing industry and those kind of more boring traditional businesses, as I would call them, they can be good. I'm still buying those at the moment. I'm still looking at how I can do it, but really looking deeply at how we can integrate and build in an element of efficiency through AI and technology. There needs to be something that gives it a moat, and good founders, people-led businesses, you've got to get a gut feel for this stuff. And I think often the biggest thing for me when I'm looking at an investment, because I see a lot that come across my desk, is like, do I understand this business? Like, do I get it straight away? I get so many that I see the decks and I'm like, I just really don't get this. Or, maybe for whatever reason, the deck's either not formatted well or it's just beyond me for whatever reason. So if I get it in a couple of minutes and I'm like, okay, cool, I would actually see benefit in that. I would use that. I could see how that would fit. Then you're on to a winner. Then you can dig deeper, make sure all the commercials and everything stack up. Also having realistic expectations around value and valuation early on is really important. Not too many hockey sticks, basically, is always good.
Sure. So I feel like every entrepreneur has this moment that just completely shifts their perspective. What's one experience that completely changed how you approached business?
I think probably starting to think a bit bigger. For a long time I was a small business owner and I saw things on a regional or localized scale. And then I got a couple of business advisors who had exited, one of them exited their company for 120, 130 million. And he was like, Luke, you're just thinking far too small. Why don't you next year try and triple your revenue? Why are you looking to do 20% growth? Let's triple it. And what would it take to triple it? And we didn't quite triple. I think we doubled the next year, but we changed that mindset of 20% was going to be enough. And then every conversation, that vision that we were building in the business would have been around, 20% is the goal. Yeah. And everyone just increases slight productivity. Whereas actually when we were we've got to double, we had to build all the foundational stuff. We had to start thinking about make sure we had the right processes, the right tooling, what does double the size actually mean and look like in reality to bring it to life. And I do find that as soon as you start that momentum and you've got that kind of focus on something bigger, you can strive for it, and often you get close if you don't hit it. So yeah, thinking bigger was a big part of it.
So what did you actually do? With your original goal was 20% growth, and then you shifted that mindset, you put processes into place, and you said, well, dang it, we're going to go 50% growth. So was it yes, putting processes into place, but also pouring more money into marketing and things like that? Or how did you actually achieve that 50% growth?
Yeah, it was focused on sales, basically. So we had 2 salespeople at the time. We hired 3 more. And we thought, well, let's go for it. I switched a bit of my focus day to day and actually started to get back involved with some of the larger pitching. So I moved 20% of my time into it. And fundamentally, internally, we moved CRM systems. We set up more sequencing and automations, bit of marketing, bit of sales, strategy. But then we hired an operations manager as well, a new ops manager with more experience, running a larger agency, almost double, triple the size of ours, to come in and look at efficiency. So we started looking at the bottom end kind of internal piece as well as that external growth factor. So it was twofold, but yeah, very focused on sales generation.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Cool.
So, marketing, I would say it's not just about visibility. And I know we talked a little bit about that. I would say it's also about impact. So what strategies should businesses kind of double down on right now to accelerate growth?
I actually, we touched on this briefly earlier, but I'm a big believer right now in kind of the C-suite or the founder doing more around their personal brand propositioning as well, and actually starting to position themselves as more of an authority, whether that's through public speaking, an element of social presence, all of that stuff I think really helps and elevates the core business brand. If we think about the biggest brands in the world, you can think of their CEOs as much as you can think about the actual brands, and I think that's a testament to the power of that. Problem is, everybody's trying to do it, but if you think about your niche and your focus, there is always a space for that credible kind of authority piece that you can build. Yeah. So I think that would be probably the first. And second to that, I think really being smart with your marketing strategy and utilizing AI, utilizing all of the up-to-date technology to streamline that stuff. It doesn't need to be as expensive as it once was. So look for efficiency basically, and don't be afraid to test things out.
Yeah. And you mentioned a personal brand, and I completely agree with you. And it seems like your own personal brand has just opened up some massive doors. So I guess my question is, how can founders use their own brand to attract clients, possibly even investors, or some of these game-changing opportunities that are out there?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you can put yourself out there from there's so many good sites now, whether it's Substack and you start writing your thoughts and your memoirs and you start putting out, written form content. From LinkedIn, you can obviously put your posts out, what's trending, what's going on in your business, but also your personal thoughts. And I think a lot of what works when it comes to your own brand is showing people a piece of your identity, your personality. Like, people in your tribe that get it, that get you, will start to follow and will engage. And I think it doesn't have to be a big following to make a big impact. And that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, awesome. Luke, where can we find you on social media?
You can Luke Tobin on most platforms, or Luke T Tobin on Instagram and X. And I've got my website, luketobin.com as well, where you can access all my social channels through there. It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Thanks for listening. I will be releasing episodes every Monday, so be sure to subscribe on the platform that you are watching this. Give it a 5-star review, and we'll see you next time.